Welcome to Kent Hance, the best storyteller in Texas podcast, brought to you by Clay Cooley Chevrolet in Irving, Texas. Find them online, claycooleychevy.com. And by First United Bank, the spirit of West Texas since 1907. Online at firstunitedbank.com. In this episode, Chancellor Hance sits down with Randi Mahomes. Randi grew up in Troop, Texas, where teaching and sports were part of her family's DNA. Her dad is a retired principal, teacher, and coach. Her mother, a secretary at the school. Randi is the proud mother of 3 children and now lives and works in Tyler, Texas. In part 1 of this 2-part episode, Chancellor Hance and Randi talk about her oldest child, Kansas City Chiefs quarterback Patrick Mahomes. Randi tells us what game she thinks Patrick will remember the most when he is an old man, and it isn't the Super Bowl victory from 2020. She also recalls the moment far away from the football field that she considers the moment she was most proud of him, and the one rule Patrick had when he came home from college to visit. Enjoy this episode of Kent Hance, the best storyteller in Texas podcast with Randi Mahomes.
Let's talk a little about your children and let's talk about Patrick.
Okay.
At what point in his life did you realize he might be an exceptional athlete?
Well, I was really young when I had him, blessed to have him changing my world. And I honestly had never changed even a diaper when I had him. I was the youngest of, all of my family and just never had that responsibility. And so he grew up and everything that he touched was a ball. To me, I'm like, that's what everybody does,
Right,
because I didn't know any different. And so everywhere we went, whether it was a gumball out of a gumball machine, I would give it to him to eat, and he would be like, catch. Or it would be Easter, and it would be an Easter egg he would find, and he would say, catch. And it was just a nonstop. And I knew he was very good, very, very talented. Of course, he got it all from me, and I was just thinking that's
Sure.
just what I was into sports, and his dad obviously was into sports, and I grew up in a sports family. So to me, that was just something that happened. I guess whenever he was about 3, I would notice he was better than other kids his age, and he knew how to play the game.
What was the first organized sport? Did he play soccer? Or was
Soccer.
It, okay.
Mm-hmm. He did. That was the first one I can sign him up for. So he did soccer. He did a little karate, anything that I could get him in. And then we did, t-ball.
Right.
He was playing on a 5 and 6-year-old t-ball team when he was 3, and he knew more of the game. And I just kind of thought, well, that's what he's around.
Right.
A lot in his life. So, I
Which
just
he had been.
He had
but
been.
You
but
didn't recognize that natural talent.
I didn't really
as much.
recognize it just because I just thought he was good. He gets it. Now that I look back and remember when he was 5, me allowing him to catch batting practice for major league teams at 5 years old, I'm like, what was I thinking? I think I was a bad mom. Oh my goodness. And he and I have talked about that when his sister had turned 5. Can you imagine her being out there? That was you, and I have videos of it. And I'm like, what in the world? And at that time there were different major league players that would come up to me or my ex-husband and say, how do you get him to do that? And to me, I'm like, how do you get him to stop?
Yeah.
It was everywhere
He wanted
we went.
to do it, no matter what.
We could be at dinner.
Challenge.
We could be, at my wedding, he literally was the ring bearer, and he throws the little pillow across the stage at my niece and was like, catch. And, he was 4, I think, at the time, and it was just always catch.
He loved to play catch.
Yes. And I laugh because even when he comes home, he likes to lay on the floor and throw things up in the air, and he used to use my TV. And I would always get on to him, you don't throw anything against the TV. He would do it soft, but he would just throw it. And so it's kind of a joke now because I'm like, when my daughter does it, his little sister does it to him, I'm like, oh no, you got to keep going. This goes on forever and ever.
Right.
And so I did find it was me and him. I always used to say it was me and him against the world. We were always traveling and doing stuff. And I learned while I was reading or watching TV that I would, instead of throwing it at him, I would throw it behind me because it would give me a little bit more time to finish the chapter of book I was reading. And I always say, like, his crazy throws, he gets those from me because I would just throw it over my head or throw it to the side, and he would somehow know, like, could see where I was throwing it and run and get it, but I was doing it just to give me a little bit more time.
That sidearm pass that he's going to his left and throws back to his right, which he's phenomenal at, and it's noted that they may need to call that the Randi Mahomes pass.
It should be that because there's times that I'll see things and they're like, why does he do that? And I'm like, I mean, he probably just does it because he want to make complete a pass. But I would do that to him for hours, whether in a hotel room or at our house
and he never got tired of it.
And I got very tired. He never got tired. And and that's just something that I would call him. Me and my girlfriends would say he was the Energizer Bunny because he kept going and going and going, and it was just something that I just got used to.
Sure.
But other well-known baseball players would come up to me or his dad and be like, my son just wants to play video games. How do you get him to do this daily? And, talk him into it. And I'm like, the only way I can punish him is to ground him from, like, the ball or, practice. Like, if, even as he got into elementary and middle school, if he was in trouble, I would say, well, then you're not going to be able to practice with your team. Because, you take away what's important to them, and I would be like, you're going to sit. I'd take him, but he'd have to sit and watch.
Right.
I never did a game because I felt like, we're a team, we need to be together. But even his coaches, I would say, he's going to watch, he's in trouble, but I want him to, because I knew that would sting the most, so.
That's good. When he got to high school, what was he playing?
Baseball and basketball were his two, loves and his two sports that, I really felt like he was going to be a baseball player. He grew up around it, and that was his love.
And his dad had been a pitcher.
Yes.
Right.
And so and he played, and they, his teams did really good. He, got on some select teams. His 8th grade year, I believe, it was 8th grade year, they went to the Junior League World Series. They won the American, and they lost against China, but it was like a really, it was exciting, and a core group of guys, of kids his age. And so that was something, I have little things he drew in preschool that said, I'm going to be a baseball player. I'm going to play, baseball. But it was like he always knew it. It wasn't like, I wish to be a movie star one day, or I wish to be this. It was like, that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah,
and
it wasn't questions, just when.
Yes. Now, football was never a question, never, ever. He tried it once, really the first year I started working at Holly Tree, and for one, it was too much for me as a mom to be able to take him to. And it was 3 days a week, and I was like, what have I got myself into? And then he turned out not liking it. He didn't like football.
What year was he in school when he first played football?
We tried like a little peewee football when he was about, I think, in 4th grade. It lasted about 2 weeks. And for one, they wouldn't let him have the position he wanted.
What do you want?
Quarterback. I wanted him to be a receiver so he could score the touchdowns.
Right.
But he wanted to be quarterback. And so he has never quit anything, and I never would let him quit anything. But that one, it was just too much for my work schedule and, parenting. Like, I couldn't keep up with it.
Sure.
And plus, ultimately, he didn't like it. And so I was like, I can't, And so he, we just never really thought about it again until, when in 7th grade, when they had it in school, like, that's just something in Texas or my family, you play every sport. And so he still never firmly got the position. And, his junior year, right before he started, he told me he didn't want to play football anymore. And
Wow.
I talked him into staying only because I knew he would be so bored sitting in the stands with the students and doing that. So I talked him into staying, and sometimes I'm like, should I have? I mean, I love where he's at now, but seeing your kid live their dream is priceless.
Sure.
But football's scary,
Well, it is, and especially if your son's a quarterback, those defensive tackles and defensive ends, they can be very cruel.
Yes, they're not my favorite positions.
No. What did he play? You said he didn't play Pee Wee after that, but did he play in the 7th or 8th or 9th grade?
He did play 7th and 8th. Him and his very best friend split the quarterback position. And I'm like, I just wanted the coach to choose one. But they always split it almost identical. And then in high school, he played safety on defense, and he hated it. That was his freshman year. He was good because he was smart about it, and he would read.
And he started.
Yes, he started, but he was backup quarterback. But the coach at the time never even gave him one play that whole season to have an opportunity. Even if we were winning, he never gave him the opportunity, and it was so discouraging. And then him and his best friend had to, try again, and they split it. It was like they were both so good, and even to this day, Patrick's like, he could have went to Division I too. He was really good too. It was just, finally Patrick won the position after the beginning of his junior year, and honestly, that's when he fell in love with football. Sometimes I don't think it's football. He fell in love with the fans.
Right.
He fell in love with...
He liked the atmosphere.
He loved the atmosphere and the excitement. I remember him telling me, like, our baseball team's good, our basketball team's good, but no one's there. Like, of course, as a mom, I'm like, well, people are at a football game because you have the band and the drill team, and you have everyone's coming, and it's Friday Night Lights
There's a lot of parents
in Texas, and it's excitement, and But that is honestly the reason he fell in love with football.
Of all his high school football accomplishments, is there any one or two that stands out?
Of his football accomplishments?
Yes, in high school.
Yes, I tell him that no matter what, and I could be wrong, but he will. When he beat John Tyler, was a rival. They always beat us.
Y'all were 3A and they were 4, or y'all were 4 and they were 5?
I think we were 4 and they were 5,
yeah.
And I think it's changed since then.
Right.
But they were, a bigger school. It was a huge rival, and his senior year, amazing game at our home stadium, and we beat them. And I tell them to this day, I'm like, if any game you talk about, that's going to be one that, and when you're 50 years old, you're going to say, remember that time we beat John Tyler? I don't know.
Did he have a great game that game?
He did. He did have a great game. It was a close game. It was exciting. It was fun. And, of course, winning's always fun. But that was one that I think it'll go down like the Super Bowl, that he will not forget.
Sure.
Yeah.
Basketball. He was a great basketball player.
Yes.
And they did well in basketball.
Yes.
And anything that stands out of his basketball playing days that you remember?
I think he really, really loved basketball. It's something that he has done, his entire life. That's one of my favorite sports. So, of course, your kids, you're going to push them towards something you love. But he loved it. I think he was very mature for his age and like an old soul, I guess. And he knew he wasn't built like NBA players. And he just felt like that wasn't going to be an option for him.
Right.
Even though I think if he would have he never concentrated on one sport ever up until his second year at Tech. And so, I think if he would have concentrated on it, he would be doing basketball now, and it would have been a focus. With football, it was not ever something that we focused on. he would literally, football season would start, and that's the day he'd pick up a football. When football season, the very last game, he would put it down, and the next day he would start basketball. Like, he'd be at a game, never touch a football again until the next season.
Right.
So it wasn't like he ever practiced on that. Now, he would practice baseball in between or have little weekend games, even basketball, but football was something that just wasn't something he ever dreamed of doing,
right,
that I ever knew about until his junior year and his senior year. And still I was like, there's no way,
well, in baseball, now, did he, at one time he thought about being a pro baseball player?
Well, he did pretty much his whole life. That was his dream. And he did, have scouts in high school. I think that should change, because I don't think any 17, 18-year-old kid should have to deal with those questions.
Right.
Their senior year in high school, having to deal with, scouts coming in and interviewing them and asking them, their life, goals. But, for him, it was like, I'll do that, but it'll be later. I want to go to college. And he wanted to go to college to do both.
Right. Mm-hmm. Now, it came down to college recruiting. Where were the major offers? Where were the offers that he received?
He really didn't receive a whole lot of offers. I hear all kinds of things, and unless it happened without me knowing, he received, things from Rice and Harvard, which I was like, go to Rice, like, oh my goodness, or Harvard, like, wow.
Right.
But he was going because he wanted to play, and, he wanted to concentrate on, and this was baseball, maybe football, I can't remember exact. He got letters from a lot of college, but not actual offers. He went and visited the Longhorns. They wanted him as safety, and he knew that was not it. Like, right, that was the reason he almost quit, playing and football, because he didn't want to play on defense. And so he really, he would get an offer for baseball, but he really didn't. Tech was like his place. Like, we had went to College Station when Cliff Kingsbury was there, or right before, he was moving. And sometimes I think if he was still there, we would have ended up there. But I think, God had a plan.
Well, he did. The thing that impressed me, Kingsbury told me that he said, I coached Johnny Manziel, mm-hmm, and this kid's got more potential. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And he did, mm-hmm, and Johnny Manziel was a great player. Mm-hmm. But Patrick has redefined the game. And but the thing that has impressed me, he hadn't changed. I was in Houston for the Tech Houston game, mm-hmm, and he came to my suite, mm-hmm, to look me up and say hi. Yes. That impressed me, mm-hmm, and that he remembers who he is, mm-hmm, and he remembers where he's from, and I think a lot of that goes back to you, and in the things you taught him, and your faith, your personal, mm-hmm, faith, and that let's talk about that just a moment. You are a person of faith. You worship, mm-hmm, and you took him to church.
I did.
My mother always took me to church. She said, he's bound to learn something, sooner or later.
I think me and your mom would have agreed.
Y'all would have been right on.
Literally, I will say, when you ask me, like, a moment that I'll never forget, or that he won't forget, my proudest moment of anything he's ever done was when he got saved. I felt like, I did what God wanted me to do, and that's the moment that's my very proudest moment, seeing him be baptized and become a Christian. Yeah. That is the moment, that's my very proudest moment of, my children, Right. And so, but, I always pray for them. And so whenever, I say, we're so blessed because, and I remind Jackson, I remind Mia, like, you're so blessed. Like, you got to look at, how you live. And when you get down, like, remember your blessings. And for Patrick, I'm Mama Bear, and I want my son, to listen to me even when they're in college or grown. And it's kind of been hard for me.
You've told him that when he's 70 or 75, you're still going to
Well, he tells me all the time, he's like, you're the only person mad at me. And I'm like, I'm not mad. It doesn't matter if I'm 90 and you're 70. I'm still going to be the one person in your world that's going to tell you to get it together or to do something. And I think he kind of understood that. I think now that he's a parent, he maybe understands a little bit more. But I know when he was in college, every time he would come home, which is not a lot when you're, busy with sports and school, we would argue because I would get my feelings hurt because he'd want to spend time with his friends like most kids his age, and I'd want to have a little time. So it got to the point that I said, I don't care if I see you while you're in town. I don't even have to know, but if I do, you don't have to come over and visit. This was like, it's kind of a joke now, but this was a God thing.
Right.
No matter what, you better be at church on Sunday before you go back. Because we would argue and he would say, I'm never coming back. And we would just argue, and it was because I just miss my child. And so I said, you better be at church. And so he might walk in late, but he would be there.
He was there.
And the couple of times he wasn't, he knew, like mom's going to be upset, but I thought if I couldn't teach him something the days he was in town, that he could hear something from, God at church. And so the first time that I went down to watch a game in Lubbock, we went to church that next Sunday.
Do you remember which church you went to?
It was a Baptist church, I believe, but it was really close to like the stadium.
It was probably First Baptist.
It was really close, and I remember we went, and he took me. And that was a moment that I was like, okay. But he, I didn't realize they still had to watch film the next day and all of that after a game. And so he's like, I got to rush after this. But we actually went to church, and it was a pastor I think they had brought to the stadium, or he's heard, because he's like, I've already heard this sermon, but he was letting me hear it. And it's still something that I, encourage him
about.
The
preacher there is Bobby Dagnall, who is also the chaplain for the football team. So that's probably, he had heard him speak on a certain subject, and he thought it was great that you could join him. And both
but it was so nice to be able for him to take me, because he knew, and it was his idea. I didn't, ask him like, are we going to go to church, but he's like, we're going to go. This is a great place. And so, and it's sad sometimes because in the off season, they did go to church on Easter, but I'm like, it's kind of hard for him to go anywhere and just be normal.
Well, I know when he came by my suite at the football game and then left, and I mean, it's just hard for him to walk 10 feet without somebody coming up, and he's always so polite and so nice about it. And it's not easy to be that way all the time, but he keeps a great attitude, and I think that's one of the reasons the fans love Patrick.
Well, I always tell him, like, even in high school when he was the quarterback or, the star athlete, or I would be like, how many other kids would love to be this? Right. And then in college, I would say, you get to play 2 sports the first year, and I'm like, so double the amount of kids want to play 2, and then he dropped down to 1, and I was like, you got to realize this is you enjoy it, because a lot of times you get so focused on everything else. I'm like, enjoy it. And I tell him that at the Super Bowl. I tell him all the time, like, have fun, like I know it's your job, and I know you want to win, but he's always wanted to win. It's always been like a drive for him.
He's always been very competitive.
In everything.
Everything that he does.
Yes.
In part 2 of Chancellor Hantz's discussion with Randi Mahomes, Randi talks about being a single mom raising 3 kids and how it used to be her family against the world. Now it seems to be the world against her family. Randi also shares her biggest regret as a single mom and offers advice to parents everywhere. Please like and subscribe to this podcast so you'll be notified when new episodes are released. Also, follow us on social media. Facebook is at The Best Storyteller in Texas Podcast. Instagram at Best Storyteller Podcast.